A new report shows Canada's intelligence community has had Chinese meddling on its radar since at least 1986. The Canadian press used the Access to Information Act to obtain the report produced by the Federal Intelligence Advisory Committee. It warned in 1986 that Beijing was using open political tactics and secret operations to influence and exploit the Chinese diaspora in Canada. This comes as Canada's police force has now charged two former Mounties under the Security of Information Act with crimes related to foreign interference. The RCMP said William Mycare and Kenneth Ingram Marsh used their network of Canadian contacts from years of policing in Canada to obtain intelligence which aided the People's Republic of China in interference efforts. Well, joining us now to unpack the latest on foreign interference in Canada is Dr. Charles Burton, China expert and senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Dr. Burton, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Good to speak with you.
Some very shocking revelations in this heavily redacted report. Dr. Burton, let's start with how China has been able to interfere in Canadian politics for 1/3 of a century without any heavy repercussions from the federal government.
Well, I think, when that report that you referred to came out in the 80s, there was a lot of skepticism in Ottawa that this could possibly be so, that the Chinese government was engaging in this kind of clandestine and covert influence operations, or that Canadians would be amenable to these approaches. So, there was a lot of tension there between the government and the RCMP at the time. And I think that there were some members of the RCMP who, resigned from the force or were forced out because they were so adamant that this was what was happening. As it turns out, as we now know all these years later, their reports were accurate, and it's really unfortunate that we didn't act on them when we first became aware of the activities of the Chinese diplomats here in Canada to try and subvert our democracy and influence the decision-making process in government.
Very unfortunate indeed, Dr. Burton. Now, just for some background, what exactly is China's interest in Canadian politics in the first place? What decisions are they trying to sway, and why?
Well, I think that, China would like to be able to invest in high tech, for example, and a lot of that has been turned down on the national security basis, and Chinese would like our government to, allow them to get these dual-use technologies back to China. There's also the question of Chinese state harassment of persons of Chinese origin, democracy activists, Uyghurs, and Tibetans, that China would prefer that we not crack down on, allow them to continue to engage in that kind of activity. And then there's in general, Chinese investment in Canada. We're concerned about Chinese state investment in sectors like mining and critical minerals. And the Chinese government would like decisions made by the government that don't foil their plans to try and further their agenda inside Canada, including espionage as well, through universities and other cyber espionage. So, there are a lot of reasons why China would like people in positions of authority not to act on allegations of serious Chinese malfeasance. And, this does seem to have been successful. And one wonders if there are policymakers inside Ottawa who hope for lucrative opportunities after they leave positions of public trust in China-connected law firms or boards, who are giving China a buy on a lot of this sort of stuff. This has recently come out with all the reports that we've heard from the CSIS and Privy Council Office Intelligence Assessment Secretariat that were not acted on. And so one wonders, was it because of Chinese influence that somehow or other this stuff was put in the back of a drawer and wasn't actioned by our security forces, and our Canadian security and sovereignty not being properly defended? We need a public inquiry into this to really get to the bottom of it and see what really happened.
Definitely, Dr. Burton. Just about a minute left here, but I definitely want to touch on this case of two former Mounties providing intelligence to China. So it seems that we had multiple informants within our national policing system, and you were highlighting other opportunities for former workers in the federal government potentially providing intelligence to China. So is there something missing in terms of internal security in our political and justice system when it comes to this? And could there be more informants that we don't know about yet?
Oh, I think there's certainly more. The question really is, how do we prevent people who have insider knowledge, such as the police? You know, these two gentlemen had a high degree of expertise in investigating financial fraud and money laundering, which, you know, may, if the allegations are proven in court, that they sold essentially to Chinese interests to allow the Chinese to figure out how to economically coerce people in Canada that they would like to see returned to China. So, you know, you retire in your 50s, you want to do something useful, you want to make income, and the Chinese provide opportunities. The question really is, with these two cases so far, is will they be found guilty of crimes in a Canadian court of law? And we'll get more details, I guess, in the weeks ahead. And I guess we can talk about it some more, Nima.
Definitely something to keep our eyes on, Dr. Burton. Of course, we'll have to have you back on the show to unpack this. Thanks again for your time today.
Very good to speak with you.
We'll be right back.